Welcome, podcast viewers and listeners, to the Lone Road iRacers podcast with me, your host, Guy Robertson. And today's episode is all about the Radical on iRacing. Some of us love the Radical, some of us probably hate the Radical, but I've teamed up with some Radical supporters and we're going to talk to them now about all things Radical. Today it's all about Radicals in iRacing, and we have some fans of the Radical with us today. Now, iRacing has had the SR8 that was put out to pasture until the Ringmeister last season, where the SR8 came out of hiding, and boy was it popular and a great drive. We have the SR10 as the current regular on the car on the track. It was great at launch. iRacing dabbled with it for one season and it was nearly undrivable, and I think we all remember that. But it slowly got better, so we're here and we're going to discuss both of these beasts. So let's meet the iRacers who have kindly joined me today. So, JR, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about you, why you like iRacing, and how many years you've been an iRacer.
Sure. Well, I'm JR Gregory. I find my way to this podcast because of I'm a commentator on Apex Racing TV, so I'm the lead commentator for our weekly broadcast of the Radical Esports Cup. We cover the top lobby, the top split of the public lobby, 2100 GMT every Friday. I'm sure many of your viewers have already watched it, but if you haven't, check it out. Great racing every week. It's super fun. A couple of our frequent flyers on that program are actually here with us today. Other than that, my personal race history, I'm a little bit older, as you can see from looking at my grizzled face on the screen compared to some of these other guys. But my video racing actually goes back to putting a quarter in a stand-up driving machine called Night Driver. Way back, probably early 80s is when I first raced a car virtually. I've been in love with virtual racing ever since. So Grand Prix Legends, GT Legends, and that finally morphed into my iRacing career, which I'm really enjoying. I think I have about 10 years on the service, and mostly public lobbies. I've gotten into leagues the last couple of years, drive with Porsche Club, and after being involved in the Radical Esports Cup and the Radical Challenge, I think it was before, it was pretty apparent how tight-knit this community is. You see the same drivers all the time, really good-natured chat most of the time, and you could tell that these guys spent a lot of time together, enjoyed each other, enjoyed driving together. Great deal of respect and trust between the drivers, and as I said, I've participated in a number of leagues over the years, and I'm always looking for something new that kind of has that atmosphere of camaraderie and kind of good-natured competition, and the Radical community certainly seemed that way from the outside. So I actually joined this year and started running the Radical Sim Racing Championship in August, and that just wrapped up with the finals a couple Sundays ago. And it from the inside, the community appeared just the same as it did from the outside. A bunch of really good guys that like each other, help each other, support each other, and overall really very positive. So, I really can't say enough good about it. And if you're looking for a change of pace, a different league experience, I'd highly recommend this group. And the car as well is fantastic. I'm typically a GT3 driver, and I actually got back in the 992 GT3R Friday and ran a race at Road America. The IMSA series is there, and as fun as it is, it just kind of felt like a little overweight kind of pig out there after spending a lot of time in the Radical. So it's really a fantastic car, and I'm kind of giving a long answer to a brief question, but I really strongly recommend giving the Radical a try. It is an absolute riot. Tons of power, tons of mechanical grip, no nannies, so you really have to have develop some skills in driving it. And it is fast, man. It blows away a GT3 car on the track. So if you always wanted your GT3 to go a little faster, give one of these Radicals a try. You won't be disappointed.
Wonderful. James.
Yeah, I think we can end the podcast there after that intro. But anyway, so yeah, I'm James Barry, and I don't have I don't have any background in motorsport. I've always just been a gamer, really. But I started on iRacing early last year, and well, everything that JR said, I can echo myself. I found my way to the Radical when I was just looking for different things to try out in official racing, as I got my feet wet, as you might say, in iRacing. And just from the get-go, like, the racing was really good. The more I raced it, the more I got to know people in the community, and all the while I've just been improving myself as a driver. And the whole broadcast thing was completely new to me, doing all these broadcast races and league races. It's something I had never done before, and when I came into it, I was just kind of amazed. I had no idea that for someone like me, obviously I'm not trying to be like an esports racer, but someone like me can just jump in to these races on a Friday night or whenever else these leagues are on, and just be, on a broadcast, be getting to know people, and be able to, like, show my friends or family, look, there I am, there's me, I'm racing. And it was just an amazing thing to become a part of. And ever since then, yeah, it's just been like just constant. The people that I've met and the experiences that I've had, the memories that I've had already in just a year and a bit have been beyond what I imagined I could get myself into when I started on iRacing. So that's how I've ended up here.
Brilliant. George?
I did have some background in real motorsport. My brother, my older brother, used to be a rally driver and a go-kart driver as well. So since I was a kid, being on four wheels, I literally grew up on a body shop, so cars was kind of much in my blood. And sim racing was always a passion. I remember back then my first games was Indy 500, which apparently was the first game from iRacing. The first game that they did back then, and I think this was early 90s. And I remember really well where you had like images as passcodes, so you had a booklet that you can look to get into the game. And also 94, the F1 game, I still remember that year really well when Senna died, and it was because I'm Portuguese, obviously him being Brazilian, there was a big connection right there. But then, yeah, it was always a passion. I always wanted to get into it. I didn't have a space for a rig. But then after COVID, things changed, remote working, and I decided, okay, it's now. So I bought a rig, John, iRacing on 22. I was kind of doing several series, didn't have a preference, but I always had like a passion for the SR8 back then. I always loved Barchettas and these prototypes, so I was really, really appealed to it, but I never got into it until I decided, okay, let's go for it, the SR10. It got involved in a couple of British leagues with the Radical Racing Series, and then obviously found the European Championships and the M's. And yeah, I don't really plan to move along from the Radicals. I think like everyone is saying, it's a great community. We've been through hell a bit after that doomed season where the car was broken, which I still don't think the car was broken. I still love the car back then, to be honest, but obviously it wasn't the easiest thing. The community took a bit of a hit on that, and we barely got official races. But I'm glad Sandro and the Radical Sim Racing team kind of got together, revamped the calendar, revamped the partnership with Apex as well to provide that visibility, and I think it's been increasing since then with great results. The World Finals was a success, the European Championship and the America's Championship were a success. So yeah, really, really passionate about this car. Like JR said, there's no nanny, so it's really all about the nail kit and having hands to tame the beast, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Clint.
My name is Clint Ogle. I've been on iRacing for just about a year. Not really any kind of form of motorsports, but been into cars my entire life. I'm also brand representative for Luminous Films. the leading supplier in chrome tent, like the show car community. So I've had my feet in the show car community for 3 or 4 years before I started getting into iRacing, and then talking with a bunch of the guys that would show up from the track cars that would show up, and they kind of devolved into getting a sim rig, getting into iRacing. Started out the same way that probably everybody else did, doing the Miata Cup, doing the GR86 Cup, and then once I got to C-Class, I found the Radical. I really enjoyed it, but I fell into that niche of people that only focused on safety rating when they first started iRacing, because everybody thought that safety rating was the one thing that you had to worry about. So I moved on from it, got all the way up into A-Class doing IMSA, and then realized that I didn't really like the GT3 racing. So I came back to the Radical, and I've been there ever since. I absolutely adore the car. I'm local to Atlanta Motorsports Park, which is one of the Radical dealers here in the States. And they also have a racing school. So April of next year, I'll be going to their racing school to get my SCCA Novice racing permit, and I'll be doing their SR1s and their SR3s out there.
Wow.
So I'm super excited, and the Radical is just kind of taking a death grip on my life.
Wow, well, a bit of jealousy, I think.
I think I'm the only American here, so I'm the only one that's got a bunch of variety of options for different schools and stuff like that around here. There's a bunch of different Radical dealerships within like 5 hours of me.
Wow. Okay, brilliant intro, and thanks for sharing all that with us. So, some of us, remember driving the SR8 version of the Radical, and then the SR10, as we've touched on, quickly came onto the market, shall we say. But the two cars are completely different in many ways. So let's start with which one is the best for you and why. So start with Clint on that.
Sadly, the SR8 was before my time. I don't think I've ever touched the SR8, so I can't really speak on the SR8. I did touch the SR10 during that broken season, and I feel like it kind of taught me a little bit more about the car when I think it was the season where I was moving up through the safety classes, so I had a little bit of time in it and learned a little bit before I moved on to GT3. So having just that little bit of time in the broken sessions, and then coming back to where it feels like an actual car, whereas it didn't feel like a car previously. I feel like I don't know. I don't have any room to talk on the SR8, but I love the SR10.
Okay, we'll go on to George then, because I know George has definitely been the SR8.
Well, actually, when I tried iRacing, I think I caught a season still with the SR8, and I did a couple of races, but the gearing was very different, so I really never got into it. And then when I decided, okay, let's go for it, they swap it to the SR10. I'm an SR10 fanboy every day of the week. It's for me obviously this is my personal, and I know a few people in the community twitch when I say that, but I still think SR10 is a much better car than SR8. The only thing the SR8 has is obviously that feel and that immersion with the sound of the engine. Obviously, that's the best sound of the both. But I do feel the SR8 is a vintage car at this point. It would actually make sense to maybe add to the multi-class along with the Nissan. Obviously, they're not the same generation. That makes no sense. But, it is for me right now. It's a vintage car that I drive for pleasure, just to have a bit of kicks. But for competition, I think the SR8, the SR10 is a much better car. I love the turbo whirl. It's the raw power when the turbo kicks in. I think it's for me much more satisfying, and I feel it's a better simulation. The SR10, the SR8 is very forgiving, and sometimes it feels a bit arcade. You just throw the car and there's grips coming out of every single surface on the car, which is it doesn't sometimes feel realistic. And the SR10, you don't have that. It's a much stiffer car. Obviously, there's going to be understeer. But for those people who complain that the car understeers a lot, maybe it's not the car. Maybe maybe you're overdriving it. So yeah, SR10, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, James.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously the SR10 has been my bread and butter on iRacing. It's really what got me into all this competition, and I drove pretty much just that car and a few other things here and there for the best part of a year. And then me and George went into the recently there was an SR8 championship that was hosted on JP Broadcasting, and that was my first real experience of the SR8. And all the guys in our SR10 league, they it was a bit of a cliche that they all missed the SR8, and the SR10 is just an understeery pile of crap in comparison. So I was definitely interested to see how I'll get on in the SR8, and I definitely know what George means by it being arcadey. It's more of a, it feels arcadey to drive. It's more forgiving. It feels like the tires are more rubbery than the SR10. The SR10 feels quite finicky in comparison. And obviously, I really enjoy the SR10 because I've got good at it. I'm very competitive in it, and that's always going to make me enjoy the car more. But as we did this season in the SR8, I started to get to know that car better as well. And I found that for me, it depends on the track. At some tracks, there was tracks like Road Atlanta and Nordschleife where the SR8 just comes alive because it travels over some of the curbs so well, and it just feels super smooth with the steering. Whereas with the SR10, like you have to drive under the limit of the car to an extent in the SR10 because it's quite a finicky car, and you have to be really delicate with it to avoid the understeer that George mentioned. But it was a really nice, refreshing thing to get to know the SR8 because yeah, maybe it's less realistic. I don't know. It's hard to say because I've no experience of real racing cars. But it was really fun to just drive a car that you just play with more at the limit, and just have, even if it's more an arcade experience, it was really fun to drive. So I really enjoyed both cars, and I think for me it's almost just track dependent, to be honest. I think they're both really good.
Joe?
Interesting. Well, my first experience was with the SR10, and I am going to lean toward it. I'm going to say for three reasons: boost, and also boost. I've got two kind of high-strung turbo cars in the garage. One of them is my wife's BMW X3. So it has a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo that's putting down about 280 horsepower. It's a monster. And my personal daily is an old 924S. I did an engine swap from a 944 turbo into that car. And it's putting down about 300 horsepower out of a 2.5 liter turbo. And there is nothing like boost, man. I mean, when the power comes on, but I guess maybe because I have so much real life experience, I also drive a highly modified older 924 turbo with an engine swap to an Audi 5-cylinder turbo. That thing's putting down about 300 horsepower with Kevlar everywhere and carbon fiber everywhere, so it's super light, super fast, kind of SR10ish. But I just love boost, man. And the way it is simulated in iRacing is fantastic. The way the power comes on, the sound of the blow-off valve between gears. I mean, it's awesome. I love a high-strung 4-cylinder turbo, and the Ford tech is fantastic, and it's in race cars on every track every weekend, and it's modern, it's fuel efficient, it's fast, it's awesome, and so I lean toward the SR10. And just another quick thing about the handling and pro tip for people getting into these. The car does feel understeery depending on your style of driving, and it's easy to fall into a pattern where you just turn in and ride the understeer through these long corners and kind of grind the front tires off. But the car responds incredibly to trail braking. It's the best trail braking car I've driven on iRacing. Yeah. So if you think the car understeers too much, as George said, the problem might be between the seat and the steering wheel, and you might need to employ a little trail braking to get it to rotate, because it drives beautifully. It's incredible.
So for the listeners who don't know what trail braking is, everybody chip in. Explain trail braking to the simpleton.
Well, I mean, simple. I guess the old style, and I'm not a huge fan of Mario Andretti, but he had a great quote about this, and what he said was that um, he found it odd that people thought that the brake pedal was to make the car slow down when the brake pedal was really to make the car turn. So you brake late and you brake during turn in, transfers weight to the front tires and causes the car to rotate, causes the rear tires to lose grip due to weight transfer, and it when the front tires are loaded up under braking when you're turning, the understeer goes away and you get some nice rotation. And the SR10 does it beautifully. It does it. I mean, you can trail brake that car at 150 miles an hour in certain corners, and it is when you get it right, it's awesome.
Anything else to add, team?
Yeah.
Go on, George.
Sorry. No. I kind of piggybacking on JR. I think it's about the best way to visualize it is weight transfer, right? So obviously on the braking, the car sweeps forward, right, to get the positive rake. So what happens is a lot of the cars, people just tend to brake and steer automatically. And what that does is not only there's a lot of weight on the front, but then the wheels are not turning to the right side. There's an overload on the grip on the front tires and the car just skids front. Trail braking is about managing that weight transfer. Instead of being an abrupt situation where you get overload, you just brake to get a bit of weight on the front to increase the grip on the front tires, and then you're able to corner more swiftly. It's about lifting early and coasting through the corner, is trying to lose speed essentially, and using the brake in order to shift the weight so you can get a bit more grip, so you can lift the back tires, reduce the grip on the back tires, and get a bit more grip on the front. Obviously, this needs to be managed very well, because if you're lifting the rear tires, you're losing grip. So it's being soft, it's being very subtle with the brake just to get that extra grip rather than to stop the car. The idea is that you slow down early, you coast through the corner, and then you brake when you actually need to reach the apex, or when you actually need to get enough speed not to understeer. Sorry, that's the way how I kind of visualize it.
Anything better than that, James?
No, nothing. I mean, nothing in terms of the technical explanation. I'll just add to that just my experience in terms of developing the technique as a driver. I know last year when I was first driving, I was tending to go hard onto the brake and then just come straight off the brake and not doing any trail braking. Then I realized from watching hot laps from some of the better Radical drivers on YouTube. I'll mention Lucas Vieira. He was someone who I used to watch a lot of laps on his YouTube channel. I just saw that he would go hard onto the brake and then he would come straight off the brake, but not completely off. He would come straight to around 5 to 10% and just hold it there through the apex until he felt that he was ready to then accelerate out the corner with pretty much no gap between braking and throttle out, so no coasting. So then I realized that I've just got to develop that technique into my foot, where when I'm coming off the brake, I need to develop the feeling to come off to around 5-10%, not coming straight off the pedal. And then that was when I realized just in general, the importance of that phase of braking where you're coming away from threshold braking down towards trail braking. The way you come off gradually off the brake is really important to developing speed in a car like the SR10, or probably in most cars in iRacing. And that was already helped me improve my speed as a driver.
And pay attention
Clint,
there, folks. James is a repeat champion of driving this car, so pay very close attention to his thoughts about this.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as James. I did a coaching session with Dalton Zavadil from Fiercely Forward, and I never did any kind of trail braking initially, because I just wanted to learn how to learn the car, trying to use more track management. And I sat down with him, and he noticed that I wasn't doing the trail braking. And definitely, we sat down on Sebring for 2.5 hours. And once he finally was able to explain it in terms to where I could understand what I needed to do with trail braking, with not just lifting straight off of it and easing off of it to about 5 to 10% and then holding it there while I go in, and then being able to immediately get back on the gas and have more speed going out of the corner. It helped my lap times on Sebring by almost 4/10 just by trail braking. So trail braking is definitely a massive advantage in the SR10. It loves trail braking and it loves to carry speed.
So there you go, listeners. A quick top racers technical way of learning to trail brake. So you've heard it from James Barry, one of the champions. Go and do it. Go and practice it. Okay, let's talk about damage resistance. Damage resistance. How do you think the two? Well, it's probably not a fair comparison. I will say, because I kind of raced a couple of seasons in the SR8. You scratch a bit of paint and it's 8 minutes in the pits in the old SR8, and I'm sure we've all, well, me and George anyway, and James a little bit, frustrated as hell when you've got 8 minutes for just a rub of paint. So that was one of the frustrating things with the old SR8. Now the SR10, it's got a little bit more forgiveness. How do you guys feel about how in iRacing, damage can affect its drivability? You want to start, Clint?
I definitely, like I said, I don't have any experience in the SR8, so I can't speak on it. But I definitely feel like the SR10 kind of feels like a cardboard box at times, that you can hit it a certain way and nothing happens to it. You just bounce right off each other and you keep racing. And then there's other times where you can get hit at the right angle, it'll trigger something and it will completely ruin the car. One of the best things that I can remember was I did a race at Road America this week, and somebody locked up on the first lap and rear-ended me and put me into the gravel pit. And just a slight tap from the rear end. Wing didn't come off. There wasn't any noticeable damage on the back of the car. There was no drivability issues. It killed 20 miles an hour off of the top speed on every single straight just by getting tapped in the back. But then there's other times where you can door bang, you can slide into each other and it won't do anything. You can straight up hit the wall on the front end and it won't hurt the front end at all. But just a small tap on the back like that killed my top speed for that race. So I definitely feel like it's hit or miss on the damage model for it.
Yeah, I feel like it might be a general iRacing problem in general, because I see that same phenomenon, if you will, in other cars as well, where the damage you get seems to be somewhat random. And I guess it's got a lot to do with the whole netcode issue. And I think that whilst obviously iRacing is trying to be as realistic as possible, the frustration for me comes from when something like netcode happens, or one of these contacts where you just feel like it was a minimal contact and then you come out with damage that effectively ruins your race. And for me, if I was in charge of iRacing, I'd probably reduce the sensitivity of the damage somewhat, particularly in the SR10 and the SR8, because they're both super sensitive to just small contacts. And yeah, as I say, maybe it's realistic in some sense, but then at the same time, with the netcode that we have, and with also just the fact that we're essentially playing a video game and that everyone has different hardware, different kind of awareness of what's around them, and a lot of little contacts just happen. And it would be nice as racers if just these little unfortunate contacts wouldn't ruin our race. So for me, it can be a bit frustrating. And for me as a driver, I've noticed that I've been very cautious, like when I go wheel to wheel with other people, because I know how many times in the past I've been like doing a league race, and I'll just get caught up in some unfortunate little contact, and as I say, it just ruins my race, because once you lose that 5-10 miles per hour in a straight line, you can't compete for a win, So that's what I would say, yeah.
Even with just 5 to 10 off of it in the draft at Road America or any other place, it's still enough to where you don't catch up on anybody on the draft. And that's one of the biggest things with the SR10 is passing on a straight line with how much draft there is. So even if you lose 5 to 10 and you can't catch the car in front of you and they just keep pulling away, it's a moot point at that point. You might as well just repair, take the time, and just try and finish the race.
Yeah. I totally agree. George, any opinions?
Yeah, I know where this question comes from because the SR8 was way worse than it is now. I think based on our championship that we did, I didn't see that happening anymore. But yeah, I think last year the damage model of the SR8 was just insane. The car was literally paper mache. Paper mache. It was just a small touch in the rear, and you start immediately seeing the spoiler completely damaged, and it just ruins the race. Good news, I think they fixed that because there was an update to the damage model done recently, and I think it affected the SR8 as well. I think iRacing overall with damage model, I think they're doing a good job. It's much better than other games where you just crash and you have like a small dent on just one panel. iRacing, they're going full on and recreating the most damage possible in the vehicle, and I think you can see that already. The SR10, the whole rear section goes off now. But I think there's still a few glitches. I think we all experienced many times in the past where you see a spoiler flying and then all of a sudden gets reattached to the car by magic. So I think obviously there's still a lot of work to be done. But yeah, I think kind of on what James is saying, damage is a big thing that can literally ruin your race, and netcode is the most unpredictable factor in all of this. So every time I personally approach battling, unless obviously I know some drivers and I can do door-to-door racing with them, but if I see other people that I know that, oh, this is not going to end up well, I don't even try because exactly any small damage just affects the performance. But I also found another workaround, and maybe this is a good tip for everyone. If you hit with the wheel straight, like if you're, for example, hitting the car sideways with the wheel straight, you won't get any damage. You won't get any damage to the wheels. But if you're on any chance are like turning a bit, there goes the connection. Sorry, I forgot the name now. And you'll get wheel damage, and that's really a KO. So a bit of an advice: if you're going to crash into a wall, keep your wheel straight. Sometimes it helps.
Good real life advice too, I think.
Well,
JR, what do you think?
You know, less of an opinion and more of venting, but yeah, I mean, first of all, just to take a step back from this, like I said, I've been playing these games for a long time, and I remember playing like the original IndyCar racing over a dial-up modem. And the fact that we can all get together and have decent racing with people from all over the world on iRacing is a miracle in that context. So it's hard for me to criticize it in the context of how much progress that they have made. But yeah, I had a terrible incident in Interlagos on Sunday in the World Finals. I was fighting a guy down the Senna S's, and we were still some overlap in turn 4, and he was on the inside and washed out across the apex and just tapped just the lightest little tap on the front, and maybe that has to do with what George was saying about steering angle, but it broke the front suspension of the car, and you know, up until that point, I don't think I've ever really had damage in one of these races where I needed a tow, because they are pretty tough. You can bang them pretty good, but it just, you know, it hit the sweet spot, or maybe more accurately, the sour spot, and kind of wrecked my race. So it was a little frustrating. Like I said, less of an opinion and more of venting. And maybe it's because the damage model is simpler on these cars, if that makes any sense. Like coming from the GT3 world, you know, little bumps and bangs can cause like minor damage to aero components. Like you can see a splitter bent a little bit, or a wing bent a little bit, and it can have a minor impact on top speed. But the radical damage model kind of seems all or nothing. There's no bent wing. There's a wing on the ground that you leave behind. Yeah. But overall, I think they're pretty tough. I mean, they're certainly tougher than a similarly sized open wheel car. But Yeah, they definitely. We see a lot of paint, a lot of rubbing, a lot of paint swapping, and a lot of banging, and the cars seem to be able to handle it pretty well. Aside from, again, my extremely bitter experience at Interlagos.
So we've got our SR10. Other than, I think most of the iRacing public, shall we say, are now all fixed anyway. So what about tuning this car? Anybody had a dabble with, having to go at tuning the SR10? Is there anything that anybody listening, if they want to open a Liga race, shall we say, and it is an open setup, we could guide them to say, go and tune this, go and try that. Everybody talks about tire pressure, for example. That's just a normal go and have a play with that. Anything else that you guys would recommend? Just shout up who wants to pitch in.
Go to James. He knows how to do it.
Yeah, I was going to say go to James.
Setups are terrible, and he knows why. So
I don't know that much about it, to be honest. So me and George do UK, the RRS League, which is open setup. And to be honest, like, I just click buttons and see what works, to be honest. I've also got help from some other people who know more about it than I do. But essentially, you obviously you can get speed from the open setup. First thing you can do is change the downforce levels, which tailor the car to different tracks. So recently we were doing Road America, and there you can definitely take some rear wing off to give more speed in the straight line. And then it's to be honest, the car characteristics I don't think they change that much when you change the setup. You can make the car softer, make the spring softer, and increase the camber and stuff like that. It can make it a bit more pleasant to drive. I know recently we were driving at Portimao, and in officials, or Algarve as it's also called, in officials it was really quite finicky to drive, and it was a bit nice for an open setup with some softer springs. But it's essentially the car is just like that in general, so you can get a bit from the setup, as I say, but it doesn't make a huge difference, I don't think. Now let's see what George thinks.
I obviously disagree with you. I think no, but it's funny because obviously me and James being on the same team, we're sharing a lot of the setups, and well, a bit more credit to James because I can do 300 setups, but they eventually end up using his because it just works. I don't know. I think it's really nice to have the open setup because gives you a bit more control in tailoring the car suited to your driving style, and also be strategic about it. And I think that's one of the things, like for example, that we take advantage on that UK league is, depending on where you're going to start the race, I'm going to have different setups. So we tend to always, for example, on the SR10, we tend to always use short gears. And even if the car maxes out on the end of the straight, it's still a decent, you still overall lap time, you still get improvements. But if I'm going to start on the back of like mid pack, for example, and I know I'm going to use a lot of draft, and I will probably have company the whole time, I might go with a standard with a standard gearbox, because you get a bit more speed, and the other problem about the short is you get to a certain part on the straight, no one goes forward, so you get really tight battle, which is really nice. So being smart about it, I think, with the gearbox mostly, I think it's one of the key setup changes that you can do to the car. And the other one, like James said, is downforce. If you have the pearls to do it, you can just lower the downforce as much as you want, and you'll have huge, insane top speeds. And I think this is why everyone is always complaining about the draft in the SR8. But you need to think about it. It's an aero car essentially that cuts through the air, and if there's no air in front, obviously there will be a massive boost, and it will act like a DRS essentially. And that's why it's so accentuated in the SR10, that draft. So obviously, I do like a car with very low downforce because I want to make the car as slick as possible. So I tend to reduce any drag and reduce any mechanical contact with the track as well. So someone in the UK said we're kind of cheating putting the camber on max, for example. But you think about it, the less tire you have in contact, the less resistance will cause. Your car will slip more. So we do get to crazy speeds of close to 300 kilometers on that car sometimes. But I think it's mostly about tactics. Approach how you want to deal with the race. Are you going to push the whole time? Then you need to have like an agile setup that you can comfortably do hot laps. Or if you're going to be behind someone, well, you're not going to push, so there's no point of doing a hot lap setup because you're just going to get stuck in traffic the whole time. So it's a bit smart, being smart about that, strategic, but I think it's a huge advantage to being stuck with one setup that fits all.
Okay, Clint, JR, you have a dabble?
I refuse to touch setups until I have to. It's way too much for me right now.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same. I don't want to be a race engineer. I want to drive. But I will say I agree with what has been said about playing with aero. That can be really fun because when you're dialing wing out of the car, you're kind of dialing up the risk. It's a risk reward, and you have to balance downforce against top end speed. So at a place like Road America or Spa is the best example to me, because you reduce the downforce to go fast on the straight and die in Blanchimont because you don't have enough downforce. And same thing with Road America and the kink. So I and something just occurred to me, and it seems like iRacing could preserve the concept of fixed setups, but allow the drivers to choose aero packages. Like most cars have a base and have a low downforce and high downforce, and you could just before the race pick which one you want to use. You want to roll the dice at Road America? Let us run the low downforce. It's still a fixed setup from out of the box setup from iRacing, but it allows you to kind of make those safety versus speed compromises, and I might make it a little more interesting.
Becomes part of your strategy then, doesn't it, for the race?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I like that idea as well.
Yeah, there we go. Let's get it over to Greg Hill and the rest of the iRacing team and see what they say. Get it on the forums. Okay, so what I've seen in probably I would say this season specifically is that the Radical is becoming more popular. I'm seeing new names. Probably 2 seasons ago, when after it was broken, the season after, I think because it was broke for a season and it was still drivable, George, I agree. I gained more points that season than before in the Radical because I stuck with it and kind of got used to it. But I'm seeing more people now racing the SR10 again than probably we have done for a while. What do you guys feel about that? Do you think it's gaining popularity again?
Maybe a bit. There's a huge discrepancy between different tracks. I guess it's true across all of iRacing, but obviously, so for example, this week we've been at Road America, and for the broadcast time slot, which is the Friday night, 9 p.m. GMT, I think we had a triple split, so it was at least, I think we had about 65 signups for that race. Whereas when we were at Navarra, which is a free track, by the way, for the same time slot, we had about 18, I think, on a free track. At Portimao, it was similar, about 15 to 18 drivers, which is it's enough to have a race in the broadcast race. Although even with those weeks, on the rest of the week, so on like a Wednesday, Thursday night, there's some tracks where there's not even an official time slot for the whole day, and it's a bit disappointing to see that. For me, I really live for those 9 p.m. broadcast races on Friday night. So as long as some good drivers show up to those ones, then I'm happy. But for people looking in from the outside who just want a more casual race, um, it's really track dependent. So obviously at Road America, you can come in and have a race on any day, but at some other tracks, there's some days where it's just not possible. And I think that puts a lot of people off. I've seen multiple Reddit posts where someone's been like, "Yo, guys, the SR10 is a really good car. You should come and try it out." And then people will just be like, "Isn't that series dead? Like, I don't want to touch that series. Just give me my GT3 where I don't have to think about what track it is. Don't have to think about how many people are doing it. I can just jump in and know I'll have a race." So it's a bit of a problem still.
I
Anybody else?
definitely kind of agree on that. That there's still a problem with popularity on it. There is also, if I remember correctly, Navarro this season. A bunch of us were talking in the Discord about how the setup seemed super finicky and really squirrely, which I feel like that
Yeah.
kind of put a lot of people off on Navarro. But it also happens throughout other tracks. If it's not a large name track, say Road America, Spa, or like Interlagos or anything, if it's not a large, very popular track, there's a good chance that you're going to be scrapping with anywhere from, at least in the U.S. time slots in the Eastern, I'm scrapping with 6 people to possibly like 12 or 13 is what it usually is. But then we go to a large track like when we started back on this season, Spa, I was racing 24 car splits, and then Road America, we're still racing 21, 22 car splits every single time that I go on to it, at least on the U.S. East Coast time slots. So it's definitely growing in popularity, but it's still falling towards everybody just wants to race specific tracks, and it's kind of frustrating. But I feel like I'm blessed being U.S. East Coast that I can still get an official every single time. There hasn't been a single race that I've ran so far that hasn't been official this season, so that's good for me. I feel like kind of the UK guys take it a lot harder than the US guys do, just because of the amount of people that are over here that are getting into it. But that's my take on it.
JR, any thoughts?
Yeah, and I agree with what has been said so far. And from my perspective, covering these for a couple of years, it seems to me that there has been an uptick in participation from when I first started. And I think that my first season broadcasting, I believe, was the season right after the undrivable SR10 season that has been referred to. But I have seen an uptick in participation, and I it feels to me, and I'm definitely a fanboy of this car, so take it with a grain of salt, but it seems to me that iRacing could do a better job promoting this car, that maybe iRacing could discount the cost of the car or even make it a free car. And I think the primary reason for that is there is a lot of interest in prototypes, starting with the P3 all the way P3, P2 all the way up to the P1, and I frankly think the SR10 would be kind of a good beginner prototype car, and they could be part of that prototype ladder where you learn to drive this type of car, and kind of sell it to the public as a learning car for people with their eyes towards prototypes, and that might. There are a couple things they could do to increase the participation, but first they have to care about doing that. So, how much pressure can we put on them to make a change? I guess is step one.
Yeah, I think everybody's raised some really good points there. So you've now got the magic wand of you are all Greg Hill, our design guy, or at least the guy who puts out what's coming for all our futures in iRacing. So money was no object. You work for iRacing. What would you change on the Radical?
Mhm.
Hmm.
I can start there. Um, well, first of all, I think the Radical is due for an update. Not necessarily the car model, but I think we do need the new Radical. This model, I think it's probably 5 years old, something like that. The actual real life model. And right now there's the XKRS XPTO, like version of it racing in real life racing, and the iRacing needs to catch up a bit on that. I think the solution could be bringing the SR3, which is a very popular entry level prototype, but I need to admit I'm not so fan of being a smaller car. But I think in terms of evolution for the radicals, I think that's what we should be looking at, is to re renew the car, change the car in order to renew the interest of the series. And piggybacking on the previous the previous question, I think that would be one of the things that could bring popularity, even if it's temporarily. It would boost a lot the numbers of the community if we would have something new to show. So my vote would be to including the SR3, or at least updating the model of the SR10. That would be what I would spend my money on.
Yeah, I don't have much to say. I don't have any particularly strong opinion on this. I'm quite happy with the car as it is. I'm aware that
It's that that watch talking. That is, James. That's that watch.
Berry
nothing
time.
to do with any personal biases. No. Yeah. So I think in iRacing in general, people complain about participation across many different series, and it's difficult for iRacing thinking about bringing in new cars, because I feel like if we brought in a new radical car, it's just going to split participation even more than it is already. There's been lots of people talking about like it'll be nice to have multi-class like they do in real life with the radicals, but for me it's a very delicate balance that you have to find with bringing in new cars, because iRacing have brought in so many new cars and people really appreciate it and really compliment them for bringing in the new content that they have done in the last couple of years. But then at the same time, they will complain about participation being split up between all these new series, and that's a big issue as well. So I'm not sure where I stand on that. And as for the car model itself, I don't really care. Like I just care about the racing itself, and I've been enjoying that. So whatever model it is, as long as it's fun to drive and race, then I don't care. And maybe that is the watch talking.
Just to circle back, we were talking about damage before, and I've kind of been thinking about it as we've been sitting here, and the damage model is a little goofy, and I think it just reflects how much time they put in it. Like I said, the GT3 damage model is very, very detailed. You get hit on the rear left, you see the rear left part of the splitter pushed up and a little kink in the wing on that side. And in the Radical, the damage we get is the whole back clip flying off the track into the grass. So I think that that reflects a lack of investing design time into the car, and if they can improve that. Did I mention I'm pretty bitter about Turn Forward Interlagos? That's the last time I'll bring it up, but
do you know who hit you? Let's name and shame. Who hit you?
What you want me to say Chad's name right here on the pod? I'm not going to do it.
Why not? Why not?
No.
Race is done.
Damage model. That's my vote.
Yeah, I think we're I totally agree with all your guys' comments. Damage model does need another look. That year they ruined it. I don't really know what they did, but I can remember going around corner 2 at Road America thinking, is my equipment broke? Has my brakes failed? Something is wrong with me, with my setup. Have I lost the ability to control eyes, brain, and foot? And clearly not. It was whatever they did to the car for that season. After season 1, which for me, actually that car drove pretty good, season 1. It was brand new. It was new to us all, but actually it did what you wanted it to do, in my opinion. And then that next season, wow, yeah, it was very, very difficult, shall we say, to keep it on the track. But it was achievable if you took your time and you had the patience to learn how to drive it. And you did have to relearn the car. So we'd all like to do bits for it. Clint, anything that you would like to change on it?
I think I'm gonna kind of piggyback off Gregory here. The damage model definitely needs to get invested in more because the same hit that I took in the Radical at Road America, if I took that in my Mustang GTD, of course I would still went into the grass. I still would have spun. I still would have got mad. I would not have lost that much speed off the top end on a GT3 car compared to a Radical car. Given a GT3 car is not going at nearly as fast, but it would not nearly have been that dramatic um, of a loss. I also kind of sympathize with adding either the SR3 or the SR5 for like a D class or like a rookie class, like introduction into it, like a newer model, or just updating the models as well, because they have added, or like I said, since they're so old, everything is now under the Radical XXR program. So they have the 3s, the 5s, and like the 10s and the new RXC that they have. So I would love to see all of the models in game, just to do like a massive Radical iRacing partnership as well, to do like an entire series based off of all the different Radical types. That's just me being a Radical fanboy, but either damaged model or a new lower end SR3 or SR5, or just a completely updated SR10.
Well, we talked earlier, didn't we, about having a mixed race like the IMSA. What about if they brought the SR8, the SR3, the SR10, and actually it was a mixed Radical race? What about that?
I would be probably in heaven, and I would never get out of my sim rig. The Radical Cup today physically runs an SR3 low, as I call it, an SR3 high. So they have, let's a Pro 1340cc and Pro 1500cc. And then you have your SR8s, your SR10s, and they even run the RXC out on track all at the same time. So you've got all these different variables. It's like, I feel like it would be comparable to running IMSA with a third or a fourth split of cars there, where you're going to have such a wide variety of trying to figure out your racecraft, getting through the race, trying to figure out who you're actually racing against, being able to get around the slower cars if you're in one of the faster cars. I would love to see enough of the Radical Series cars to get into their own multi-class racing, or enough testing to where we figure out where the SR10 would fit into a multi-class race with what other cars iRacing already has.
Yeah. That's another one to stick on the forums and to see what traction that gives. Okay, I'm just conscious of time. I just want to touch base on probably a last topic. Radical leagues. So we've all raced with each other or met each other through Radical leagues, basically, or in the public domain. We all, I just want to touch base on what we've just experienced in the RadicalSimRacing.com World Finals. What do new people who are aspiring to join a league get to the finals? What do you think they've got to do? How do they learn the car for a start? Any tips for budding Radical racers?
Go slow. Be patient. Like not actually like physically go slow, but go slow when you're trying to learn the car, pick a track, be patient with it. It's not like you have, like they've said before, there's no nannies in there. If you like, oh, I've raced GT3, I can do this turn it and do X, Y, and Z and get it to work, and you go in and you take the Radical in there, you don't have any of the assists that your GT3 has. You're gonna go in there, you're gonna go into the wall, you're gonna spin. Just take the time to figure out how the car reacts to the inputs that you do, make the changes that you need to for what car that you're coming from, and then slowly pick up the pace, switch to a different track, learn different inputs and different maneuvers out of it. Just have to be patient with it. That's the big thing that I have learned, is I have to be patient, give myself time to learn.
Yeah, I think obviously the SR10 is not an easy car to, you cannot just jump out of the Miata to an SR10. It's completely different cars, different aero package, different way of brakings. I think when it comes down to the leagues and the competition organization, I do like where we are right now. Obviously, since the Doom season, Radical decided that they need to be a bit more involved and try to clear up their name as well. So that's when the broadcasts, the Friday night broadcast kind of came in to kind of repopulate a bit that momentum. Um, but I think, wanting to start on the radicals, I think the E Cup is, for me, what I consider the main competition. Is the official iRacing series, is literally an official. It's the virtual version of the real life Radical E Cups as well. So my suggestion would be to start there and also to learn the car, join the practice sessions, having a bit of racing experience, learn the community as well because we're all there. Learn who you should fight and who you shouldn't fight. So that it's a really good.
Mr. James Barry there, Mr. James
Oh,
Barry.
I learned very early not to mess with Mr. James after Nords, where he, yeah, um, yeah. So I think that would be my advice. I think the E Cup is the best place to start to practice to get the racecraft, and then eventually, yeah, if you're confident with the level of skill and the level of pace, then absolutely the world finals, or the competition towards the world finals, the European Championship and the Americans are really good platforms for that. I think those went really well. We had an amazing participation. Obviously, there's a bit of an attrition as soon as people realize, oh, I'm not going to win this, so why bother? Obviously, the participation took a bit of a hit, but we still had a positive balance after it. And the World Finals, I think it was a good success. Radical was very happy about that because that's their goal. Is they have the real life World Finals and then having the virtual version of that. That's what they were aspiring, and I think Sandro did a really good work on that. But yeah, for whoever wants to start, join the Friday night broadcast and listen to JR's amazing radiophonic voice commentating and showing all the highlights. So yeah.
Yeah, my 2 cents that I would add is obviously it's sound advice to say to people, be patient learning the car. The thing I would also say is kind of in the opposite sense. The best, if people are scared of like league racing and being on broadcast, the best way to get used to it is by doing them, and you'll just get used to being in those kind of pressure situations. If you feel, if you're scared that like, oh, I'm going to go on a broadcast and I'm going to make a mistake and ruin someone's race and be embarrassed in front of people watching, like, yeah, that will happen. But the best, as I say, the best way to learn uh, how to not do those things is to go through that process where you make those mistakes, and you'll just get used to being in those situations. And then the more you do it, the more you'll get used to it, and the more you'll come to love it. And all of the leagues we do on the RSR side is the Friday nights, and then the official the European and America's championships. It's all just really good to be a part of, and the more the merrier. I think the more people we can get into those, the better. So yeah, anyone who's interested in doing those, I'd say just jump straight into them, because we're all very loving people and caring, and we'll welcome you with open arms as long as you're not
Most of us, yeah, most of
a
us, not all of
terrorist
us, yeah,
like some
exactly.
people.
I think I would break it down into 3 steps, man, and I think part of it echoes what has been said, particularly by Clint, and that is step one is to keep the car on the track, especially if you're at one of the more popular tracks with multiple splits and you're in the bottom split and kind of trying to work your way up. Keep the car on the track. If you qualify in the bottom half of the pack, you keep the car on the track, you're going to finish in the top half, because these races can be a little crashy. These cars are difficult, and people who are impatient on the throttle or too aggressive on cold tires are going to go off, and you're going to pass them in the grass. So definitely step one, keep the car on the track. Step two, we touched on this before, is learn how to trail brake the car. There is I've never driven a car that trail brakes as well as this car does. It's brilliantly designed, and trail brakes wonderfully in high speed and low speed corners. You can get it to rotate around a hairpin if you do it right, and that's something that James actually taught me when he was kind enough to give me a little bit of coaching. Taught me how to get the car to rotate at the Andretti hairpin on Laguna Seca. I didn't think it was possible to do it that slow, but it is, and he showed me how to do that. So that is step 2, and then step 3 for me anyway. Coming from GT3s, you know, I'm decently quick, but still, you know, a second and a half or 2 seconds off of the pointy end, and that interval is getting smaller. And what is helping me make that interval smaller is trusting the car, and coming from a GT3, you know, the grip that these cars have, both mechanical grip and the aero grip when you get into the higher speed corners, is insane. And you just have to have faith that it's going to make it. And it requires, you know, driving these things on the ragged edge requires super precision. You have to hit your marks. You have to turn in at the same spot every time. But as your ability to do that improves, the car will do things that you're not used to cars doing, and you just have to have confidence that it can do it, because it can. It's crazy what these things, the performance of them on the track. So that is my 3-step plan, and definitely show up. I mean, if you're thinking about getting your feet wet in these radicals, you got a great overview of them today. There's some really great, friendly people, helpful people, and a really tight community that's super fun. There's a fun Discord community, so you know, give it a try. $14.95, and you have a lifetime of radical battling with really some of the best esports drivers in the world, particularly on Friday, 2100 GMT. And there's where I plug Apex Racing TV. So if you want to get another taste of it, go ahead and check out our broadcast. You don't have to even watch it live. They're archived, so you could look at a few of them up right now. We just had a great race at Road America. You can go back and find a race from Olton Park. Those are always fantastic. We had a good race at Brands, great races at Nürburgring, some good action at Sebring, where we're going to be this coming Friday. So I would really encourage you, if you're sick of Miatas, sick of the GT3 bros and all the contact, you're sick of getting creamed by a prototype in IMSA, take a breath of fresh air and drive that radical.
That last sentence is specifically why I got back out of IMSA and got back into the radical. Oh, yeah. That hit too close to home.
We've all been there, haven't we? We've all been there on IMSA. Oh, just dip in IMSA. Yeah, you forget there's some psychopaths out there, and you're getting out of the way no matter what. Gentlemen, I think that's a wrap. I just want to thank you all very, very much. Listeners, you've heard us talk about the Radical. I'll put a few links in the show notes. Apex Racing, for one, where to find their videos on YouTube, plus radicalsimracing.com as well for anybody that's interested. Hook up with Sandro, he'll sort you out, or speak to any of the guys on there, George, James, myself. Everybody will help you, as JR said. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Good luck in your next races.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, boys.
Well, we've heard a lot about the Radical on today's show. If anybody's interested in the Radical, joining a league, or even watching the Radicals being raced on iRacing on Apex Racing, the links are in the show notes. Until then, folks, stay safe out there, happy iRacing, and I'll see you on the track next week.